did you go on there thinking like, oh, I actually might find a love connection, or were you just open to it, or did you want it, or were you like, I'm just here to make a fun show and what happens happens?
Well, I was definitely open to it, but I didn't necessarily think that that would be. I'm like really picky. There's, I don't just, like everybody. But then of course, I was, I was, I was surprised that, I was kind of surprised. I was like, what? I didn't, I wasn't really going in thinking like, yeah, right. How are you gonna find someone, that I'm gonna like? Because of course, also at the end of the day, I wanted to make a good entertainment. So I wasn't, there was a combination of things going on.
Makes sense.
And then everything else was sort of like, okay, well, if you find somebody, but
what you're saying is like the primary thing was you want to make a good show, and if love happened, then awesome. But
yeah,
but that makes sense.
Like love or finding a connection isn't always. I mean, it doesn't just like you don't just get a bunch of people in the room and say one out of one. I don't know, maybe, and you see like, okay, like I'm gonna, one of these people I'm gonna like.
But the odds were more in your favor because it wasn't just like 10 random people. It was 10 people who clearly were entertainers on some level themselves, or interested in being in entertainment, and some of them were musicians, and I could tell the producers were going for good looking guys, and so it increases the likelihood that you would find a connection when it's like tailored that specific way.
Okay, so when it came to like London, things did get like a little weepy for myself, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna like like let's like we're not gonna cut him. They're like, yeah, we're gonna cut him because he's like, and I'm like, no, and oh no, he quit now, and all, and I'm just like, okay. And then a couple, like the only thing that I really just was like determined that this would be so cool if he like came back, and they were like, they didn't really they kind of liked it at first, but then they didn't like, and then they didn't like it at first, and then they allowed it to happen because they thought like, okay, well, whatever, like let's see,
it definitely made things happens. Interesting for sure.
But I don't, honestly, I think that I wish I would not have done that. I wish I would have just like let them just let things play out the way it was already playing out, instead of try to like go back and like make something work that wasn't obviously meant to be in the cards necessarily, because it was already unfolding itself
in
like,
a certain way.
Yeah, the person already didn't want to be there. The person already like, then they tried to like leave on their own terms, and rather than be eliminated and all this shit, and then so it's like, yeah, why do I want to? But that's just my nature, anyways.
Well, it seems like you had a legitimate connection with him, and
it was almost like those maybe some people on the show for my show did that, but where you have to kind of like force a feeling.
Okay. So everybody was harping on you about your relationship with Charles, and they were like, you still live with him, and what's up with that, and how are you not having sex with him if you still live together? And I was like, I've literally been in that exact same situation, and I felt so sorry for you, because I felt like they were just looking for something, because they couldn't figure out any other thing to hold against you. So that was the thing that they kept coming back at you with.
Yeah, and not to get again too personal into our relationship, but like, our relationship had been at least I got together with him when I was 18, I think it was.
Yeah, when our bands played together,
he was a little bit older.
Together.
He's older than us. So but around that time, just before around that time, we already had our problems, but we chose to just, I think like sometimes you get in a relationship and you're just so close with that person, and you just like, something's wrong, but you're so comfortable, or you're so just whatever, that you don't choose to do anything about it. At one point Charles had tried to choose to do something about it. He was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And we got in a big fight and like all those things, and I begged and begged and begged. But then after getting, back together, I think it was more like a comforting thing that he was there to help me then move on.
So it seemed to me that you did legitimately develop feelings for Bret Michaels.
He really wasn't, really, to be honest, he wasn't my type.
Yeah, okay.
He really wasn't.
Yeah.
I like Daisy a lot. I'm addicted. I don't care. I don't want rehab.
But in real life, I just didn't feel like any, like, I mean, of course, if he was like, Daisy, I chose you, and we're like, let's really get married and have a baby, I'd be like, okay, maybe I'll think about it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you had a legitimate connection with him, and because you definitely came across as someone who wears their heart on their sleeve, and you come across as somebody who is not afraid to be vulnerable, which I thought was impressive given like the fact that we were on TV and everything. But you did allow yourself to feel your feelings and be vulnerable.
But legitimately, like I just didn't. He just didn't connect with me. We didn't connect. I don't think.
Because on your exit, I remember it was just like it was so like sad, but also like sweet and funny.
Wow, he's picking me. Really?
When you were just like sobbing, you're like, I just need some ice cream. Like,
And I feel like bad for anybody who's listening to this and then they didn't watch the show and then they're like, oh, and then they might be like sad about it. That it's not like 100%.
What a curl, but a ball, and eat a lot of ice cream.
I don't know what you felt or anyone else felt. Okay, like so I can only just say what I felt and where my head was after going there and doing the whole thing. Like he just wasn't really my cup of tea.
I think he legitimately had an attraction to you.
Yeah,
for sure.
I didn't really have like an attraction to him.
Yeah. Okay.
So now was he a good person and all that stuff? Yes, and
yeah,
so,
he's very charismatic.
I just wasn't finding like a real like. And now had there had really been a real attraction, God knows what I would have done. That would have been like knives and guns and get away from like.
I don't know how Christy does it. Like his real life chick. Like I mean, they clearly have a mutual understanding or whatever.
Sure, you have to.
I couldn't do it.
You have to.
More power to her.
No, you have to. I mean, that's what it's like when you date. You should just people who are in the field of entertainment. You have an understanding because like that's their job.
I mean, I could never openly share my man though. Like that's a whole emotional
that's a
process.
Whole different thing. Like we know some mutual friends that like how they work and that works for them and that's totally cool. And I think it just depends on where you are with your relationship. Maybe someday, 60 years from now, if you're still with Johnny, you guys might be like, you know what?
I'm tired. Neighbors, maybe the neighbors
just get over there and like,
One thing I also wanted to ask you about, I've heard rumors about your relationship with Ricky Rackman.
Friggin' Ricky Rackman comes out, man, and it was like a total boner kill.
So you guys were like really good friends, for a long time, and he genuinely cared about you, or that was the perception. Did that ever become romantic?
Oh no, I had like a huge crush on Ricky.
It's almost time for elimination, and Ricky shows up to give me some advice.
But he was married, so
yeah.
And no, unfortunately, that was something that wouldn't happen because he was married.
But you guys seemed really tight. In fact, I had Ricky Rackman on the podcast too, and he was saying you guys are super
so sweet. I haven't talked to him in like quite some time as well. So I think that he was a really nice guy. I don't know what's going on with him now. I hope he's doing good. But I did have like a super huge crush on him. Like in terms of, like that was like sorry. Every time he would come in the room, everyone's like Mira
the producer.
They would be like, Ricky's coming. He would come in the door and be like, hi, Ricky. I was like super crushed on Ricky. I was like, who cares about all these other like
Headbangers Ball. I mean, I was like so into that.
And he's like, yeah, fuck that guy. And I'm like, yeah.